So you want to create a chatbot with Next.js 13 and OpenAI as your API provider. Well, you have come to the right video because that's what we'll create in today's video. In this video, you will use the AI package provided by Vercel and you will use streaming, so that means the answer which is provided by OpenAI isn't being generated just in one block. The answer will be provided each word. So pretty much you will have a stream of words till the answer is pretty much finished. We will also store the answer at the end in the database, so you can definitely expand the project even further. I hope you will learn a lot, and now let's check out the demo behind me. So on my screen right now you can see what we built today. So we have pretty much a ChatGPT clone in that sense. And right now we have a default state when we don't have any messages. I can now send a message. So let's say, hey, how are you? And I can click on the button to send the message. You will now see that we will get in a second a response from OpenAI. And you can see that the message hasn't been generated in one block, but the message has been streamed word by word. Also, the messages are stored in a database, and now I think we can start, so let's go. So to get started, I will cd into my desktop directory and cd into my YouTube directory, and inside of here I will run npx create-next-app@latest, since I want to install the latest package of Next.js. Now the first thing the CLI will ask me for is the name of our application. Let's name a chatbot. Then we will use TypeScript, we will use ESLint, we will use Tailwind CSS, we won't use the source directory, we will use the app router, we won't customize the default import alias, and now we can click enter and this will install everything, and once that's done I will come back to you guys. So Next.js has now finished installing, and I will now go back to Visual Studio Code, and as you see I already opened the project, and if you want to do the same just click on here on File and click on Open Folder. But right now as you see our directory is pretty much empty, so that's pretty much the default template Next.js ships with, and I think the first thing I will do right now is actually install two packages that we will need for this project. And right now you can just go to my GitHub and copy this command, and what we will install is first of all the AI package, and the AI package is pretty much provided by Vercel, and that's pretty much a wrapper which makes it much easier to work with AI in that sense. And we install OpenAI Edge, and OpenAI Edge is pretty much used to connect to OpenAI. So that's the package provided by OpenAI, and we will also use the API of OpenAI today. So now let me click enter. This will install for a bit, and I think we can actually right now first of all go into the globals.css. So right here, because we have some styling that we won't need. So let me delete that right now first of all. So now that looks good. Let me see if everything is installed, and yes, that's done. So now I think we can actually come to the first step. And I think the first thing we will do right now is actually create pretty much the API route for our OpenAI text stream. So what you'll have to do is go inside of your app folder, and inside of the app folder, let's create a new folder called API. And now inside of here, we'll have to give it a name convention of route.ts. So now we have pretty much created an API route, and now we have to also do a bit of configuration inside of here. Now the first thing I will have to do is pretty much create a configuration file for OpenAI. So we want to create an API client in that sense. So what you'll have to do is first of all to create a constant called config, which will be equal to new configuration. And configuration, as you see, is imported from OpenAI-Edge. Now inside of here, we'll have to give it an API key. So right now we don't have any API key. So what I want to do right now is go to the OpenAI website and get the API key. Now, if you didn't know, OpenAI is pretty much the creator also of ChatGPT and a few more AI products. And we will use the API from OpenAI to pretty much create our chatbot. So our ChatGPT clone in that sense. So what I will right now do is click on login and log in into OpenAI. And now inside of the dashboard, you'll click right here on API, and this will pretty much log you in. What you'll have to do now is click on your profile right here on the top right corner, And then what you will do is actually click on View API Keys. So right now you see right here, you can create API keys. And as you see, I have already created 2 API keys, but I will now create a new secret key since I won't use them. So let's do that. We'll have to give it a name. So let me do a chat-bot-next.js and let me click on create secret key. Now right here you see it has created a new secret key for me and I won't be able to view it again. So I will have to copy it right now. And then let me go to Visual Studio Code. And what I will do right now is actually create a new .env file. So let's do an .env, and then env file is pretty much where you store your environment variables. And now let's give it a name of OpenAI underscore API underscore key, and let's paste the secret key that we have just copied. So that looks good. Also right here inside of the git ignore, let me right here just write .env, since the last time I've deployed to Visual Studio to Vercel, I got a few errors. And now that looks good in my opinion. We have stored our key. Let me copy the name right now since we will need it right now. And now for the API key, what we will do is do in process.env, and you will have to give it the name of your environment variable that we have just created. So now that looks good in my opinion. And what I want to do now is actually create an OpenAI client pretty much. So what you'll have to do is a constant, which we'll name OpenAI, which will be equal to new OpenAI API, which we again import from OpenAI-edge. And let me right here pass the config that we have just created. So now that looks good in my opinion. What I want to do now is actually also set our runtime to the edge environment. So if you didn't know, Vercel pretty much works on 2 environments. First of all, your pretty much local environment, so Node.js, or your edge environment, which works on Cloudflare and does not use Node.js. Now the edge runtime has a few benefits. You don't have to rely on any cold starts, it's much faster, and you have a global network. So that's why we'll use the edge runtime, but you of course can use the normal Node.js runtime if you want to. So what you will have to do is actually pretty easy. All you have to do is an export const runtime, which we will set to edge. Now right here we pretty much tell Next.js that we'll want to use the edge environment or the edge runtime, and Vercel, once we will deploy, will see that and set it to the edge environment. So now that looks good, and what we'll have to do now is actually right here create our API handler. So inside of this API handler, I want to pretty much get post requests. So not get, but post requests. So to do that, it's actually pretty easy. All you have to do is an export async function, and let me spell function of course correctly. We'll have to give it a name of post, and inside of here I want to get a request. Right now you see request or TypeScript in that sense pretty much complains because it does not know what type request is. So let me give it a type of request, and request, let me spell that correctly, oh my god, just like that. And now you see we don't get any errors anymore. Now let me open that function, and now that looks good. Now the first thing I want to do right here is pretty much get our message from our request object. And to do that, right here, let's do a const, and right here we'll destructure our message. So let's do that. And this will just be equal to await request.json, just like that. Now that looks good. And now we will pretty much do the interesting thing. What we will do now is pretty much ask ChatGPT, or not ChatGPT, but OpenAI, to give us a pretty much response to our question or message. So that's actually pretty easy. All you have to do is do a const response, which you can of course also name differently if you want to. This will be equal to await OpenAI. Now OpenAI is again the constant that we have created on top right here. Dot create chat completion, and inside of here we'll have to give it a few values. First of all, we'll have to give it a model. Now the model is pretty much whatever you want to use. Now there are multiple models which you can use. You can use GPT-4, GPT-3, GPT 3.5. That's all depending on you and whatever plan you have on the OpenAI website. They all have different pricing, so definitely check it out. But what we'll use will be GPT 3.5, and this will be in Dash Turbo. So that's pretty much GPT 3.5. You could of course also use GPT-4 if you have the means for that. Now the next thing we can do is actually do a stream. Now, if you set a stream to true, what I have done right now, that's pretty interesting since now the message will pretty much stream to you. You won't get one block once the text is finished, but you will get it word by word. So just how ChatGPT does that. That's very cool, and it's great that it's so easy to do right here. Now the next value we'll have to give it right now is the message which we have created. So messages will be equal to message, just like that. So now that's all actually. It is so easy. We have now created our request to OpenAI, so the API pretty much, and now that's pretty much done. What we will have to do now is actually create pretty much a stream, so an OpenAI stream, which we can then stream to our front end. To do that, that's actually again pretty easy. All you have to do right now is do a const stream, and this will just be equal to OpenAI stream, just like that. Inside of here, let me pass my response, and now that's done. And now the last thing we'll actually have to do is return our stream to our front end. So what you'll have to do is then return new streaming text response, and the streaming text response is imported from the AI package which we installed. And now inside of here, you'll only have to pass your stream. Now that's actually done. Our API is now done. So what we'll have to do now is actually code our front end. And now the first thing I will actually do is go inside of our layout right here. And now inside of the layout, we actually only have to do one small thing. So let me copy the children right here and let me wrap them inside of a main element. And for the main element, I actually only have to give it one class name, and the class name will just be age of full. Now that looks good, and let me actually start our dev server so we see something. And to do that, run npm run dev and click on enter. This will now start your dev server on localhost 3000, so let me open that. So now you see I'm on localhost 3000. Let me zoom in a bit for you guys. And as you see, this does not look very good, so let me change that. To do that, go inside of your page.tsx and let's delete everything inside of this return statement. And now inside of this return statement, all I will do is actually create an h1 tag and let's say hello from the index page. And now if I save that and go back, you see this looks way better. Now there's already one thing I will change right now, and that's actually create a pretty much meta tag. So I want to change the title right here on top. And to do that, go inside of your layout.tsx, and right here you see your metadata function. Right here you see a title and a description. Let's change the title to Marshall GPT Chatbot. And for the description, let me change it to the best chatbot in the world on YouTube. Something like that. That looks good. And if I now go back, you see we have now created a title called Marshall GPT Chatbot. And right now, if I open my DevTools right here, and on the elements, if I zoom in a bit, so let me do that, you can click on the head right here. And if you scroll down a bit, you will see right here meta name description with the content. So that pretty much helps with SEO, and that's good that you know how to do that. So now I think we can actually create pretty much our UI for our chat application. So let's do that right now. Now what I will have to do for that is go right here inside of our page.tsx, and let me first of all delete our image tag. And now I will have to mark it as use client because I will actually use state inside of this page. And if I would not mark it as use client, we would get errors. And actually, if you want to test it out, let me just delete the use client. And once we'll come to check it out, you will see we'll get an error. But let's now just leave it like that. Let me create a new return statement. Now inside of the return statement, I want to create a new div element and let me style that. So let's give it a class name of min age screen, and all this pretty much tells our application is that this page or this div element should have a minimum height of 100 viewport height. And let's also give it a background of neutral, let's say 800, but you of course can change it to whatever you want. If I now save that and go back, you right now see that our background has changed to this darkish color. So now inside of this div element, what I will actually do before I do anything in there is actually get our response from OpenAI. And that's actually pretty easy in my opinion. So what you'll have to do right here is doing const with an empty object. So we'll destructure it later. And this will be equal to useChat. Now you see useChat weirdly does not import for me. So what I will do is go on top. And now inside of here, what I will do is pretty much do an import. Let's do an useChat. And useChat is imported from AI/React. Now right now we don't get any errors anymore, so that looks good. And now right here useChat is an hook, so let me do that. And now right here we can structure useChat, and I want to get a few things. First of all, I want to get the messages, I want to get an input, I want to get the handle input change, and I want to get the handle submit. Also for useChat, we actually have to configure it, so we have to pretty much tell it where our API lives. So right here you will give it an API, and if you go back right now, you see our API pretty much lives in the API folder. So all you will have to do actually is just give it an /API. And that's all it is to it. Now we pretty much have created our front end. So we pretty much hooked up our API route to our front end. That's all it is. And as you see, this AI package by Vercel makes things way easier than it would be normally. And now that looks good. So I think we can actually continue with the UI. And now the first thing I will want to do actually inside of here is pretty much check if we have any messages. So what you will have to do right now inside of here is do a check. So if messages.length is not equal to 0, let's use ternary. Let me return something. And if this is false, let me also return something. Let's first of all style the state where pretty much the user does not have any messages. So let's give it a div element first of all. And let me actually give both a div element so we don't get any errors. And now again for the state where we pretty much have no messages, let me first of all give it a class name of wfull, flex, justify, center, and we'll give it a padding top of 32. Now inside of this div, I want to create an h1 tag and let me style that. So let's give it a class name of font, which will be bold, and text, which will be 3XL. And inside of this h1 tag, I will just say, please use the input field below. Let me also maybe use an emoji right here. And let's use this icon, which shows pretty much the down below. But you don't have to use it, so you can leave it like that. If I now go back and if I reload everything, you will now see we get an error. And why is this error? It's pretty cryptic. It does not really tell us what the error is. It only tells us something like webpack imported module is not a function. And actually the only error we have is that, as I already stated, we don't set our page right here as use client. So that's what the error is actually. So on top, use and use client. And if you now go back and reload the page, and as you see right now, we right here see this h1 tag with please use the input field below. But that's black, I don't want that. So what I will actually do is go back inside of our layout.tsx. And for the main element right here, let's give it a class name of text white. This will now pretty much be our default value. And if I go back, you see right here, please use the input field below. And this looks way better. Let me also maybe zoom in a bit more for you guys. I think that's even better. So what I will actually have to do now is go back inside of our page.tsx and let's continue. Now, there are two things we can do right now. Either we create pretty much our form element down below, or we create the state for the user, where you see the messages. And I think the first thing we will actually do right now is create the form element for the user. So that's actually, again, pretty easy. All you have to do is right here, go above the last div and create a new div element. Or not in div element, sorry, but in form element. Now, I won't need an action, so let me delete the action. And instead of an action, let me use an onSubmit. And for the onSubmit, let me use our handle submit function, which is provided by the useChat hook right here. Let me also style that. So let's give it a class name. And the class name will be padding 5, fixed. I will give it a bottom, which will be of 0. We'll also have a left, which will be of 0. We'll have a width, which will be 75%. And now if you didn't know, you can pretty much use these brackets, which you also use with an array, to pretty much use custom values. So you don't have to use this Tailwind pretty much naming with 3/4 or anything like that. You can use your custom values just like that. So I will use it like that. And now I will also have to give it a pretty much a background color. So let's do an BG of, let's say, neutral, and let's say 500. Let me see how that looks. I think that's a bit too bright, so let's actually change it to BG neutral, let's say 600. Let's save that and go back, and I think this looks actually even better. So now I think we can continue again, and what I will do now is inside of this form element, let me create a new div element. Let me style that, so let's give it a class name of relative. We'll also give it right now in flex and items, which will be center. Now inside of this div, I will actually want to pretty much create a text area. And again, I forgot to install a package, which will be important from us. So I want to pretty much use a text area, which will pretty much auto resize. So if the user pretty much creates multiple lines, the text area will resize with the user input. So let me stop the dev server. And what I will have to do right now is actually do an npm I react text area auto size. Now again, if you don't want to type it out, just go to my GitHub repo and copy the command. And now let's click enter, and this will now install this auto size pretty much component. And now inside of this div element, I want to pretty much use the text area which I've just installed. So let me go on top and import it. So let's do an import text area, and this will be equal, or not equal, but from react text area auto size. So now that looks good. We have now imported that. So let me use it inside of the div element. So let me import that, and this will be an self-closing tag. And now inside of here, I will have to give it a few values. First of all, let's use an tab index, and this will just be 0. Then we'll also have an required field, since I want the user to be required to pretty much do an import. Let's give it a default rows of pretty much 1. And then let's also give it a value, and the value will be input. Let's also give it an onChange, and the onChange will be handle input change. Again, both of these pretty much values are right here derived from our used chat hook. Let's give it a few more fields. I want to give it an autofocus, and let me give it also a placeholder. For the placeholder, let's say send message ... Let's do a spell check, and the spell check will be actually just false. And now I think the last thing I want to do is give it a class name or a few class names. So let's do class name of W full. We'll have a focus, and the focus will be outline of none. We'll have a shadow, and the shadow will be teal of, let's say, 700. Let's do a shadow of XL. Let's do a placeholder. And for the placeholder, let's do a text, which will be gray, and let's do a 200. Also, let's do a text, which will be small, and then also let's do a text, which will be white, and let's do a padding of 5. Let's do a padding right of 16, and let's do a rounded of XL. So now let me save that and go back, and still we don't see anything actually. So what I will have to do is actually restart my dev server. I forgot that. So let's do an npm run dev. And this will now again restart my dev server. So let me reload that. And now I already see a few things I want to change. First of all, you see right here, I have given this pretty much outline, if you want to name it like that, and background color of BG neutral 600. Let me first of all change that. And let me also change this background of our text area, since right now it's white, but I want to have it this color of BG neutral 600. So what you'll have to do right now in the text area, let me change the class name to BG neutral of 600. And then right now for our form, right here you see I have gave it a class name of BG neutral 600. Let me change it to a BG neutral of 800. If I now save that and go back, you right now see we have changed our pretty much form outline on top. We don't have this ugly background anymore. It pretty much flows into our normal background. And you see that our input is also looking way better. And on the bottom, we have pretty much a shadow. So now that looks great in my opinion. And the last thing we'll have to do for our form is pretty much create a submit button. So under your text area, create a button, you will have to give it a type, and the type right now will just be submit actually. And then we'll also have to give it a class name. And for the class name, let's do an absolute, let's do an BG of teal, let's say 500, and let's do a padding of 2, and rounded, which will be large, white, which will be 0, and margin white, which will be 5. Now inside of the button, I will actually want to use an SVG. And for the SVG, I will now go to heroicons.com, and heroicons.com is pretty much a project by the Tailwind CSS team, which gives you free SVG icons to use. So let me search for, let's say, send, and let me use the first one. Let me use the solid icon, and let me copy the JSX. And to be more precise, the icon is called paper-airplane. So now let me copy JSX, let's go back, and let me paste it inside of here. Now for this, let me actually change the styling a bit. Let's do a width of 5 and height of 5, and let's do a text which will be white. If I now go back to localhost 3000, you will see right now we have our submit button, which looks great in my opinion. So now we are pretty much done. We have created our pretty much if statement where we check if we have any messages, and we have created our form right here. So what I can do right now, in our check if we have any messages, right here in the top div, let's do an h1 tag and say you have messages. So right now we'll pretty much test if everything works. If I now go back and let's do a message of hello from our tutorial, and if I now click right here on our submit button, you will see our state has changed, and that's because pretty much OpenAI has responded with a message. So what I want to do now is actually style these messages and actually show also the messages which we get back from OpenAI. So what I will do right now, first of all, let me delete this h1 tag since that looks pretty ugly, and let me style the div element. Let's give it a class name of padding bottom of 32, padding top of 5. Let's give it a space which will be of y5, and let's give it a width of, let's say again, 75%, and I will again use it as a custom value. Also, let's do an mx of auto, and let's give it a relative state or position in that sense. Now inside of this div, what I want to do now is pretty much map over the messages and show them. So what you will have to do inside of here is get your messages and let's map over them. Let's get the message of the user and let's return that inside of here. Now right here, what you will do is pretty much first of all create a div element. And now the first thing you will have to do inside of this div element, and that's also why right now ESLint complains, is give it a key element, or a key prop, I'm sorry. So what you'll have to do right now is give it a key, and for the key, let's do a message.id. So right now we don't get any React errors anymore, and that looks good. Let's also do a class name of wfull. And now inside of this div element, I want to pretty much check what role the message sender has. So if the message is of role user, I want to show one UI. And if the message comes from our response, so from OpenAI, I want to show pretty much a bit of a different design, or an icon actually. So what I will have to do right now is check if the message.role is equal, so let me do that correctly, to the user. I want to use an ternary. Let me return something, and if this is false, let me also return something. Let's again give both values or both returns in div, so we don't get any errors anymore. And now that looks good. Now let me actually start off with styling pretty much the message of the user. Or actually, before I do that, let's show the message actually. So what you'll have to do is for both divs, do the message.content. So let me do that right here, and let me do it right here, message.content. And if I now save that and go back, and let me reload our page, and let's create a message. So let's say hello from the tutorial, which should work now. If I now do that and click enter, you will actually see right now our user input right here, hello from the tutorial, which should work now. But one thing I don't see right now is actually the content of the AI. So let's see where the error is. So to check out the error, what I will have to do is actually open my terminal, and right here in the terminal I get an error message of unhandled rejection, error response, messages is a required property. So right now for you pretty much the message is a bit cryptic, but I actually know what the error is. So if I go back right now and go inside of our route handler, so inside of our API route, you will see right here I pretty much destructure message. But that's not correct. I shouldn't destructure message, but I should destructure messages. Since if you go back to our page.tsx, you see right here we have the messages and not the message. So now in theory this should work again. So let me reload the page and let's say again hello, this should work. And let's see what OpenAI responds to that. So right here you see right now we got a response, and you also saw pretty much an interesting thing. You saw we pretty much got a stream. We didn't get pretty much one code block. What we got our complete answer in a stream of multiple words. So now where we don't get any errors anymore, I think we can actually start with styling pretty much the responses. So let me again go back, and now for the user, let's start off with the user. Let me delete this div element and let's create a new div element. Let's give it a class name, let's give it a flex, items, which will be center, and then gap, which will be x of 2. Let's create another div inside of this div, and let me style that. So let's give it a class name of bg, which will be gray, let's say 500. And let's also give it an age of 12 and a width of 12. Also, let's do a rounded of lg. Now, if you didn't know, what I want to do is pretty much show an image in the left corner and then the message on the right side. And that's what we'll do right here, right now. We'll create a div element where we pretty much set both divs to flex. We set them to item center. And right here, we have pretty much created our wrapper for our SVG icon. So we gave it a background and then height and then rounded. And now inside of this div, what I want to do is again show an SVG icon. And to do that, let's again go to heroicons.com and let's search for a user property. And right here, I want to use this first one. Let me again copy the solid one and let's copy JSX. If I now go back, let me save it and paste it inside of this div element and let me style that. So let me delete the width and the height and let's give it a width of full, an age of full, text which will be white, and a padding of 1. If I would now save that and go back to localhost 3000, you right here see pretty much the icon that I have now created. What I want to do now also is again show the message, since I don't do that right now. And to do that, go under the SVG and under the div, and right here let's create a new p tag. Let's style that. So let's give it a class name of rounded, which will be lg. We'll also have a padding, which will be 3, width, which will be full, border, which will be gray 500, and let's give it a border of 2 and text which will be small. Inside of this p tag, I want now to show just the message dot content. If I now save that and go back, you see right now, right here the user icon with the message hello, this should work. Let me zoom in again a bit. So now that looks great in my opinion. And now I can style pretty much the response or the AI response. And to do that, again, that's pretty easy. I will again just copy everything that we have done. So inside of this message.role, so the check, I will just copy right here inside of here everything. And let me paste it down below. So if I now go back, you see we have 2 responses. Both are styled the same, but that's not what I wanted. So for the AI response, let me first of all change the border. So right here we have a border of gray 500. Let me change it to a teal 500. If I now go back, you already see that pretty much the border has changed. And let me also change the background of the icon. To do that, let me go right here to the SVG wrapper, and let's do, instead of an BG gray 500, let's do a teal 500. If I now go back, that looks way better in my opinion, and I think we can actually continue. Also right now you see that pretty much we have an item center, so the icon is also always in the center. You don't have to do that. What you could do, for example, is change item center to just nothing, so just flex on both sides. And if I now save that and go back, you will see that the icon will always be on the top. This is maybe a better UX if you want to do it like that, since if the response is a bit longer, the icon will always be on the top. Also, you see that the icons right now both are the same. So let me change that to distinguish it better. Let's search for, let's say, computer or chip actually, and let me copy the JSX. And now for the last one again, let me just change the SVG. If I now save that and go back again, you see that looks better, but we again have to change the styling a bit. So let's delete the width 6 and height 6, and let's do width of full, height which will be full, text which will be white, and padding which will be 1. If I now save that and go back again, you see this looks now great and everything works. So now let's actually create a little bit of chat application. Let's say, how are you today? Let's see if everything works. So you'll have to click on the icon right here. This will send a response. You see we get a message back from OpenAI. Let's actually do, say, create a small biography of Next.js. This will now pretty much create a small little text about Next.js, and you will again see actually the first error we'll get. You see pretty much our content right now, or the response by OpenAI. You don't see it because it's pretty much below this or behind our text field. If I, of course, scroll down below, you see it, but it should actually automatically scroll down below. So let's actually fix that. So if I pretty much, we create a message, it should scroll down below automatically without any input from the user. And to do that, go back, and now right here, we'll have to actually create a ref. I know most people don't create any refs anymore, but to make it work, we'll have to use a useRef hook from React. So let's do a constant, let's name it message and ref. This will be equal to useRef, which is imported from React, and this will just be null. Also, to prevent any errors from TypeScript, let's give it a generic, and the generic will be HTML input element, just like that. And now we'll have to pretty much create a function, which we will name scroll to bottom. So let's do a const scroll to bottom, and this will be a function or an arrow function actually. And now let me open that. Inside of here, let's do a message and ref dot current dot scroll into view, just like that. And inside of here, we'll have to give them behavior, and I want to make it smooth, just like that. Also, now we have to use a use effect. So let's import use effect from React, and with the use effect, we want to pretty much scroll the user every time below when we get a new message. So let me pretty much create the use effect right now, just like that. We'll have to give it a dependency, and the dependency will just be messages. And all this dependency does is pretty much tell the use effect to always rerun when we get a new message. And now inside of the use effect, let me just call scroll to bottom, so our function. Now this will still not work since we have to hook it up to our UI, and that's again very easy. So all you have to do is go right on top of your form, and you will have to create a div element, and you won't have to create any content. All you have to do is give it a ref, and the ref will just be of message and ref. Now in theory this will actually work. So what I will now do again is create a biography, or not a biography, but create a essay of Next.js, something like that. This should now give me a bit of a longer response. So let's see if the scrolling works actually. So now we should come to the height where it should scroll, and as you see it scrolls and I don't do anything. So my hands right now are on the air, and you see everything scrolls on its own. I don't do anything, I don't scroll anything, everything is done by itself. You also see nothing pretty much overflows, everything looks great. So that looks great, I think we are actually done with that. So now you see in theory our project is done, everything works. But there's another cool thing you can do, which is optional. You don't have to do it. But for example, if you go to ChatGPT, you see that the messages that you create are pretty much stored in their database. So I think let's actually also do that. So let's check out the functionality of that. So to do that, the first thing we'll have to do is again create a database. And I'm right now on planetscale.com, and that's a MySQL provider. They use the tests, so scaling is definitely not a problem with them. And also YouTube uses the tests, for example. So what you'll have to do right now is click on sign in, and then right here you will have to click on create a new database, and then right here let's give it a name. So the name will just be chat application. For the region I will use Frankfurt, but you of course should choose what is nearest to you. For the plan let's use hobby since that's free, and then let's click on create database. This will now take a bit, and once pretty much the application has been initialized, I will come back. So now you see our application, or pretty much PlanetScale has done initializing. So now before we do anything, let me go back. Let's open a terminal. And now inside of here, I want to install Prisma, since we'll have to kind of interact with our database. So what you'll have to do is an npm i-d, which pretty much installs Prisma as a development dependency. Now this is all you have to do, and also we'll have to install Prisma client. So let's do npm i add Prisma /client, and this will now just install Prisma client. So now that looks good, and now let's also init Prisma. So let's do an npx Prisma init, and now you'll see if I go back, it has pretty much created one folder for us, which is called Prisma, and inside of here we have an empty schema. Also, we have our environment variable, and we have a database URL, which is right now empty. So now let me go back to PlanetScale, and let me click on get connection strings. Let's click on create password, and right here we get our .env. Now let me copy this environment variable, let me delete the old database URL, and let me paste what I've just copied. Also right here on schema.prisma, let me copy that. Let's go back to our schema, and let me paste what I've just copied. So now we have pretty much initialized Prisma, and what I can do now is pretty much create a model where we will store our messages. And to do that, what you will have to do right now is create a model. Let's name it message, and let me open that. Let's give it an ID of string. This should be an @id at default, and let's pass the UUID. And now inside of here, let's give it a question, and the question will be of type string, and we'll have an answer, which will also be of type string. Now that's all you need for now. Also what you of course could do is create and created at. This will be of type date time, and let's give it a default of let's say now. So now that looks good. You will now have to push this Prisma to PlanetScale, and to do that, all you have to do is an npx Prisma db push, and this will push our schema to PlanetScale. So now our database is in sync with Prisma, and we can now actually pretty much continue. And now to make it work actually, before we do anything, we'll have to create a global file for Prisma. So right now I'm on the Prisma docs homepage, and right now if you pretty much Google Next.js Prisma best practices, you will get on site into this page, and this will pretty much tell you that you have to create a global Prisma client when you're in the dev environment. So now you can copy it either inside of here, or you can go to my GitHub and copy it from there. So I have now copied that right here, and I will go inside of my app folder and create a new file called db.ts. And let me paste that inside of here. And all it does right now is pretty much check if we are in a development environment. And if we are in the development environment, it creates a global Prisma client. And if we are in a production environment, we just create a new Prisma client. And now that's all it is. Actually, we are done with that. And now to make everything work, what you will have to do is go again to your API inside of here and go inside of your route.ts. Now inside of the OpenAI stream, we pretty much get a few helpers. And what I want to get is pretty much a callback function, which will be on completion. And once it's completed, I want to pretty much send our message, which we have created and which OpenAI has created, to our database. So what you will have to do right here is get a callback called on completion. And this right here will be an async function, or an async arrow function actually. And inside of here, we'll get the completion string. And right now TypeScript complains because it does not know what type that is. So let's give it a type of string. And now let's open the arrow function inside of here. And now inside of here, you can do a const data, which will be equal to await Prisma. And Prisma is all imported from our DB file dot message dot create. And inside of here, let's pass our data prop, and we have to give it the two values. So our answer, and we have to give it a question. Now for the answer, that's actually pretty easy. That's just our completion that we get right here. And for our question, it's just the messages that we get from the request object. So let me do that. And now if I save that, in theory, actually everything should work right now. So let's test it out. What I will do right now, let me check if the dev server is running. No, so let me clear everything. Let's do npm run dev. And now let me go back. Let's go to localhost 3000 and let's reload everything. So now you see our dev server has restarted, and before I do anything, let me open my terminal. Right here, click on a new tab or a new terminal tab, and what I want to do is an npx Prisma Studio, and this was pretty much open Prisma Studio. So right now you see Prisma Studio has opened on localhost 5555, and inside of here we have our message schema or message model. Now let's test out if everything works. So let me send a message with hello, does this work? And let's click on enter. Right now you'll see we get an error, and that's not quite what I've expected. So let me check the message. And right here it tells me pretty much Prisma client is unable to run in the browser. And now where I think about it a bit, I actually remember that Prisma does not work on the Edge environment. So right now you see our runtime is set to Edge. And when our runtime is set to Edge, sadly, Prisma does not work. So if I would now pretty much comment that out, so just like that, and test it out again. So let's say again, hello, and let's click enter. You will now see we won't get any error. And that's because, again, when we don't run on the Edge runtime, we run on the Node.js environment. And that's when Prisma works. So now you see we don't get any error. And if I go back to Prisma Studio, and if I now refresh Prisma Studio, I sadly see no content. I'm not quite sure where the error is. So let me open the terminal. And what you see is we get an error. And it tells me unhandled rejection error, Prisma client, something with the message. And right here I see the question is not a string as I thought. It's actually an array. And that's of course not what I want to do actually. So you see question is an array with an object, with a role and a content. And actually to fix it, it's not that hard. What you'll have to do is right now go inside of this question right here, or right here, and with the messages, you'll have to do a dot slice -1, and I want to get the first value inside of this array. So I pretty much slice the array, I get the last value, and now inside of here, I want to get the content, so dot content. If I now save that and let's reload the page, and let's say again, how are you? And now let's click on enter right here. And if I go back again, you see I already created a message, but that's not important. And if I now click on reload, we get another entry with, hey, how are you? And with a response. Now, one thing you should remember, if I create a too long response, so let's say, hey, how are you? Answer very long. And if I now click on enter, you will see that our AI will respond with a longer text. And if I go to Prisma Studio and refresh the page, you see we don't get any new entry. And if I go back and open the terminal, you will see unhandled rejection error, and the provided value for the column is too long. So right now we pretty much get the error that our response from the AI is too long and it can't be stored inside of there. And of course you could change that and create another type or anything like that. But I actually don't want to do that right now because you pretty much now get the concept of that. And if you want to mess with that, you can do that. Of course, it's not that hard actually. Also, now I think we have come to the last step. And the last step is actually to deploy our application to Vercel. And the first thing we'll have to do is create a new GitHub repo. So I'm now on github.com/new, and the first thing I will have to do is give it a name. So let's do chatbot Next.js YouTube. Let's make it public and let me click on create repository. Now this will pretty much give me instructions on how to create a new repository, or actually how to connect my local repository to GitHub. And let's do that right now. Let me open my terminal, let me stop everything, let me clear everything. And the first thing I will have to do, let me zoom in a bit first of all. I will have to do first of all and git init, and this will initialize a new repository. Right here you see it reinitializes my existing Git repository, but that's not important. Then I will have to do an git add everything with a dot. This will now add everything to my commit. And now the first thing I will have to do is actually commit my first message. So let me copy that right here and let me paste that. So right here I will do a git commit, and let's change the message from first comment to, let's say, finished website. And let's click enter. This will now commit all of our files as you see right here. And then let's create a new branch. So let me copy that and paste that. And the last step is to add a remote origin. So let me paste that. And let's push our code now. So let me paste that. This will now push our code to GitHub. And if I now go back and reload GitHub right here, you see we get our code right here. You see we get our code right here. So that looks great in my opinion. And I think we can now actually go to Vercel and deploy our application. So I'm now at vercel.com/new. And now I'll have to import this chatbot Next.js. So let me click on import. Right here you already see we have a framework preset, so that looks good. Now the last thing I will have to do is add environment variables. So what I will have to do is open the .env file and let me just copy both values right here and let me paste them inside of here. So now that looks good. And now let me click right here on deploy. So now this will deploy our application to Vercel. And also, if you can remember, we have changed our runtime, so we don't run anymore on the Edge runtime, but we'll now run on the Node.js environment. So that's fine, but of course you can just change our Prisma right here to not use it, and then you can run with the Edge environment. So now you'll see we get the deployment right here, and once that's finished, I will come back. So now you see we don't have an application, but we have an error. I know, that's the best thing you want to see. It's my favorite. So you see the error right here is just that Prisma has detected that a project was built on Vercel, which caches dependencies. Now this is not the first time that I have this error. So all it tells me right now is pretty much that I have to use a post install script to run the Prisma generate command, since it's cached on Vercel and any serverless platform in that sense. And if you open the link right here, you will see that the solution right here is to add a custom post install script. So let's do that. I will copy that right here. So post install Prisma generate. I will open package.json, and then inside of the scripts, let me put it under the lint. So right here, post install Prisma generate. Now that looks good. All you have to do now inside of this terminal is run again. Let me do clear. Let's do a git add everything. Let's do a git commit -m now working. Let's click enter and let's do a git push. This will now push our code again to GitHub. And if I now go back to Vercel, this will rebuild our application. So now right here you see it builds, and I can click on it and I can check the logs. And once that's done, I will come back. So what you see right now, we have our application, which has been officially deployed. Let me zoom in a bit again, since that's way too big. And let's test it out right now. So let me send a message of, hey, let me click on enter. We get my question right here, and we should get a response actually. So hello, how can I assist you today? So as you see, everything works. And now if you want to use the Edge environment, all you have to do is pretty much go again to your route and uncomment the runtime and delete our Prisma right here. But that's all it is for today. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. And now go and enjoy your day, and I will see you on the next video. So bye.